Now, in order to download the database, you will need a compatible transfer drive.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Deltabase, the show where I sit down and chat with other Transformers creators and discuss their personal journey with the franchise and what they're up to in the creative space. Today I'm joined by a master historian who knows even more than myself about not only the current running Skybound comic series, but also the vast history and lore behind IDW's original 2005 run. That is Moonbase 3. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's quite the intro. That's a lot to live up to.
I'm sure you have all of IDW 2005's Transformers comic stories right at the front of your mind at all times.
Well, some of them more so than others.
I agree with you. I think some of them are more memorable than others.
Right.
Some are
Yeah.
worth forgetting.
Yes.
Now, Moonbase, you started your YouTube channel, at least from the videos that people can find that are up, discussing the concept and ideas behind Transformers Infiltration, which is one of the original starting comics to IDW's 2005 run. But soon after that, you took a step into the very short-lived world of Hearts of Steel. Now, you admit in your video that while the comic is a huge, colossal mess, it's a bit of a guilty pleasure for you. What do you think about this Hearts of Steel comic really caused it to fall so short?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think that there's probably a few things. The first thing I would say is probably it kind of seemed like it went off the rails a little bit from what the original intention was going to be. There were other plans for it, including another artist that was lined up whose name I am forgetting at the moment. But I think one of the big things for me is that it just feels like there's not enough space for the whole thing to kind of develop. And then the other thing is just the characters, or I guess kind of the lack of characters. The Transformers in particular, I think, were written kind of strangely, I think I would say. It's more of like a robotic take on the Transformers characters themselves. The humans, I thought, were fine. Personally, I was not thrilled with the way Dixon writes Transformers.
Yeah, it's kind of a unique issue that the Transformers are the issue in the Transformers
Right. Yeah.
product. Normally it's the humans that people are like, hey, get these humans out of here. We don't want this.
The Transformers just kind of seemed a little flat to me. I do think that was a deliberate choice. I think that is what Dixon was going for. And so I can't fault him for that, for having that particular vision. I think he was probably influenced by the Marvel comics a little bit in that way, like the early Marvel comics. It's just not something that really lands for me personally.
I guess it's probably good. I should have led with this question as well. If you can explain to viewers who may not know, you and I know what Hearts of Steel is, but if you can kind of even just do a quick explanation of what that is, what setting that's set in.
Yes. So it's set in the early period of like the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, and it's kind of, well, originally it was supposed to be an alternate kind of history take on kind of like a what if for the Transformers. In this case, what if the Transformers were reactivated at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution? And
Right.
so rather than turning into cars and planes, they turn into locomotives and zeppelins. John Henry, Mark Twain, historical figures make an appearance. Yeah, it's just kind of, it's an interesting concept for sure.
So that, to my knowledge, was kind of Hasbro had kind of branded that as this Evolutions, and had that Evolutions brand gone on with Transformers as that, as you said, as this what if type of series, what other timelines would have you personally liked to see next? But what other timelines do you think could have really worked well for Transformers?
I don't remember if it was in a letters column. I think it might have been in like one of those editorials at the ends of the issue. But I think that they pitched something with the Italian Renaissance. That might have just been like a little idea that they threw in there. I mean, I don't know how that would have worked necessarily, but I think that it would have been cool to see probably like World War II. Like, I think that that would have been cool to see. I know that they kind of I think that they touched on that with the Devil's Due, GI Joe, and Transformers, which I have to admit, I still have not read this. I've been getting comments about how I should read those crossovers, and I have them, but I still have not gotten around to reading them. To my shame, I think that that would have been an interesting time period, the early 20th century. I mean, even, I don't know, just pick a decade in the early 20th century, really.
Hmm.
The 60s, the 70s. I think all of that would have been pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think that would have been a cool way to view the characters, not just from a design point, but how they would fit into that world. Obviously, we know that one of the Michael Bay movies, I guess, kind of touched on that. But as with many things in those movies, it was kind of there in the film just because.
Right.
And so to see Bumblebee fighting Nazi Germany was like, oh, that's a neat idea. Oh, and we're done. We're off to the next thing. So maybe there's
Yeah.
some untapped potential there.
Yeah, so that's another blind spot for me is that I actually haven't seen all of the Bay films. So which one was that?
That is The Last Night. So
Okay.
the what most people would consider the worst of the Michael Bay movies.
Okay.
There's But moving past evolutions, we have to discuss IDW. Now, it's been a while since I have read through the continuity, and that's partially because there's so much of it. But something that I'm seeing more and more of often is that people are passing on that continuity because of its sheer size, because there's so much. To those people, how would you encourage them to spend the time? Would you say, hey, you got to read everything? Or would you say, hey, you can kind of cherry pick what's best out of that continuity?
I think that you can cherry pick from that continuity. Like the total nerd in me wants to say, you got to read everything because
Hmm.
everything kind of ties together.
You can't miss context.
Right, exactly. And like especially like later on when you start getting into phase two, you start seeing some real, yeah, I feel like John Barber just kind of, bent himself into pretzels trying to make all of this different stuff work that was
Yeah.
maybe not even necessarily intended to be, viewed as one continuous line. The nerd in me says like you got to read everything, but really I think that breaking it up into smaller chunks of whatever might appeal to you is, I mean, that's honestly that's how I read the continuity usually is I pick my favorites. Every once in a while I will get a wild hair and be like I'm going to read the whole thing, and it's this massive undertaking. But especially for people who haven't read it before, that's the problem even with that is that there are so many just individual points where that continuity might appeal to Transformers fans
Hmm.
that you almost have like a pretty intimidating list, just being like, you should pick up Infiltration or you should read the Autocracy trilogy. But I think in general, yeah, I would kind of tailor it to what kind of fan I'm talking to, what kind of Transformers fan.
Hmm.
Try to get a feel for what they're interested in. If they're a fan of the Marvel run or the Marvel UK run, for example, then I would recommend starting with Infiltration or Stormbringer, maybe. Stormbringer is actually a really good starting point in general
Hmm.
for
It is.
IDW. It's very short, like it's a low commitment. The art is amazing, and it's a pretty solid Transformers story. One of my favorites, in fact. So I guess if I had to pick one, it would be that one. But yeah, I mean, I could totally kind of drill in a little bit more and try to pinpoint what somebody is looking for and be like, oh, you got to check this out. But yeah, I don't know. It is kind of an intimidating continuity, to be sure.
It's almost kind of as if the IDW continuity is reflective of the Transformers brand. There's so many different pockets of Transformers that people can jump in and out of. That's something that I've always personally loved about it, is that there's different iterations for everybody and anybody out there. And IDW is kind of its own, it's like that in itself. There's so many different areas and pockets that you can jump in and out of. That being said, there is also the burden of having to tie everything together. I
Yeah.
mean, you and I both know that Hearts of Steel comic was kind of written as a what if, but then they sort of kind of, like you said, bent themselves into a pretzel to have it connect with IDW in a sense.
Yes, most definitely. And I think that, from just kind of observing it as, I don't know, maybe like objectively as like a process, like I think that's really impressive. I mean, some cases more so than others, where it's just like, hey, we're gonna take this obscure comic that was never intended to be in continuity. And what if it was, But it does make it really, I don't want to say unapproachable, but it definitely makes it difficult for
Mhm.
newcomers. I mean, apart from the fact that it's also out of print currently, but yeah, it's a big one for sure. But I think you're right. Like I do think that having a continuity that stretches on for that long is a bit of a burden, especially in terms of bringing on new readers. It's like a part-time job almost is being a fan of these huge continuities and just kind of being like, does this actually work the way that they've slotted this in here? For me personally, like when I look at that stuff, I'm kind of just like, oh, that's cool. I'm not gonna get too fussed over the finer details. It is a lot, and, even just for my own enjoyment. Now, how exactly does this work again? It can get kind of confusing. So
Yeah.
it's intimidating for sure.
In its totality, where do you think the IDW continuity sits in terms of quality when it comes to Transformers media, with the good and the bad?
I think that it is one of the more ambitious pieces of Transformers media that we have. As far as quality goes, I would say that it is a little uneven.
Do you think that in the case of there's more bad than there is good?
I don't know that I would say that personally. I
Mhm.
know that there are fans that would say that. I've
Yeah.
I have I have seen them.
They're easy to find.
Yes, yes, for sure. I know that there are people who feel that way. I don't personally feel that way. I actually feel like there is more good than bad in there,
Hmm.
and I like some of the stuff that a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but many people dislike. I'm a big fan of like the barber stuff. I know that that didn't necessarily land with everybody.
Mhm.
But I really liked Robots in Disguise and even into Optimus Prime, the Optimus Prime series.
That's a hot take right there. So we had just talked about Optimus Prime and how he's not very his later role in IDW was not the most well received by most people.
Yeah.
Speaking of opinions, now that we've heard yours about the later half of IDW and Optimus, you and I were speaking before the show some time ago, and I just had to bring this up. You mentioned to me that you are a Beast Machines defender.
Right.
And I'd like to put you on trial right now. And please
Uh-oh.
explain to me what exactly you're defending and why you're defending it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a poor choice of words on my part. Um,
Well, just by the way, the sentencing on this might be death. So,
okay, well, I have made a horrible mistake. Um, but for Beast Machines, now to be fair, I haven't seen it in a long time. Probably, so I watched it once originally when it was on TV, and at that point, when I was watching it, in the interest of full disclosure here, which will I can maybe appeal to the jury later on for mercy with this, but I hadn't seen the entirety of Beast Wars yet, so there were gaps in my Beast Wars knowledge.
you're basically pleading insanity at this point.
I I think that's the only defense here, really. Um, but so I watched it originally when it was on television, and then I watched it the whole thing in, I want to say, 2012 again, and I still enjoyed it then. I don't know how I'd feel about it today, but I think that the things that I liked about it, I liked the story that they were telling. I liked the tone of the whole thing. And I think it was maybe just kind of a time and place thing for me where I was at in my life. I was the first time I saw it, I was kind of towards the end of my teen years. I think I was either 17 or 18 when it was on the air. And so I really liked this idea, and this is the controversial part because I know not everybody feels this way, but I really liked the idea of some of these characters changing or becoming these totally different people compared to who they used to be. And sometimes those changes were unpleasant and they were painful or hard. I will say that I do think the show did Rat Trap dirty. I will not defend that. I will also not defend the character designs. I've never, even the first time through, I never liked the way the characters look in that show. They're
Yeah.
probably my least favorite character designs in the history of the brand.
So you're saying it's a good idea to watch the show with your eyes closed?
I mean, I think it could still work. I think it could still work. I mean, the voice acting is excellent. It would make a nice radio drama.
No, I would agree, and I think that it's easy for most people to dislike Beast Machines because Beast Wars is held up so much higher, especially these days for nostalgia and for so many other reasons. I grew up watching Beast Wars, and I think that something people may not remember or keep in mind is that while Beast Machines didn't create many of these new ideas like, Transformers having a spark as their soul. Those weren't new ideas. I really think that they kind of brought those more existential questions and stories and, like you said, real stories of growth to the forefront of the franchise. No offense to Generation 1, but
Oh yeah.
the character growth in Beast Machines is a lot more robust than what we get in Generation 1.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And just to be totally clear, having seen the entirety of Beast Wars now, it's clearly the better show. Like I would, I would definitely
Yes.
say that it's the better show. But yeah, I think that you really hit on a lot of what appealed to me about Beast Machines and what continues to appeal to me about that show. Kind of the existential questions that were there, just the journey that Optimus Primal went on in that show. His decisions and his overall demeanor. He's not always somebody you're like, oh, I really like this character right now. He's a perfect paragon. I enjoyed that, I know that that's not going to be for everybody, and I accept that. I think overall for me the good outweighs the bad with that show.
I think you've pleaded your case very well. Let the comment section decide your fate. I will say I do think hearing you speak about it has brought me back to thinking about it more. And I think again it's easy to look at it in retrospect without thinking much about what was going on, who it was made for, and to say, "Oh, yep, it's bad. Therefore, I'm never going to think about it again." But to think about the overall larger picture. And it probably was, my guess is, a very drastic change to go from Beast Wars, which was quite goofy at many points in time, to
Right.
Beast Machines, which, again, I haven't seen it either in quite a long time, but I don't really recall it being too goofy. Pretty
No.
depressing almost, if I recall.
Yeah, the only thing that really stands out in my mind as being goofy from that show was the Waspinator reveal. But that's the only one I remember. I'm sure that's not the only one. But yeah, I mean, I think yeah, it was depressing at times, and it feels very like a show that came out in the late '90s or early 2000s. I can't remember
Mm,
exactly when that was, but it just kind of has that vibe where it's like industrial music had like permeated
edgy.
like the exactly edgy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing the characters were missing were leather outfits. I'm sure they
Correct.
would have done that.
I'm sure that they thought about it. They're like, how can we work in something resembling a leather jacket?
Optimus Primal in a leather jacket. Oh, I don't know if we would have ever recovered in the late
I
'90s from that.
I don't
Transformers would have been dead.
I don't think that I would stand here and try to plead a case for Beast Machines if that had happened.
When are we gonna start getting new Beast Machines toys? I know we've had a few in the past, but is Hasbro
Yeah.
really willing to reach back into those areas and go, yeah, let's redo that?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question because I have not seen Energon, but you kind of have to think that those designs maybe transcended the quality of the
Hmm.
animation, and people probably have a lot of fondness for the toys. I mean, honestly, Defender though I may be, I have I have zero interest in Beast Machine toys, to be honest. So I would not buy them. I would not be interested in them in any shape or form. Yeah, it was really just the fiction for me with that one.
Because the designs are horrible. They're ugly. We can't
Yes,
lie about it.
no, there is no defending them.
Well, maybe what was it? Did they call him Jetstorm? Maybe the Jetstorm design was okay.
So yeah, the Viacon generals, they were all
Hmm.
right. I think they were the
Yeah,
best part of the character
because they looked
designs.
like Transformers. They didn't look like
Exactly.
Nightmare gobbledygook.
Yeah, whatever Rat Trap was.
Man, even just thinking, just imagine being in your home and waking up and that thing just rolls in to your room with the lights off. I would probably at that point just end it and be like, I don't even want to deal with this. I'm gonna go.
Hey, maybe that's how they reboot Beast Machines is as a horror movie.
It's a it's a nightmare horror
Yeah,
movie.
the regular Transformers, it's their living nightmare.
It's it's the Dead Universe. It's a new version of the Dead Universe
Oh
from
man,
the comics.
the lamest dead universe.
The Shatterglass Ultra Magnus has nothing on this Dead Universe. He's not
Right.
even scary anymore. Well, Moonbase, I'm going to go ahead and throw us into this lightning round. I'm going to ask you 3 questions about Transformers, and I want you to answer as quickly as possibly as you can. Try
Okay.
not to think about the answer too much. Just kind of say whatever comes to the top of your head. All right. First question is, what do you think the biggest misstep of the IDW continuity is?
The Costa run.
Pick one Beast Machines character that would get a legacy-styled toy. And it can't be a vehicle. I'm going to add a new one. It cannot be a Viacon General.
Oh man, Optimus Primal.
I was scared you were going to say Rat Trap.
I
Just
thought
to,
about doing it just as a joke, but
yeah. And well, actually, my last lightning question is something we already answered, which is if you could have any time period used in an Evolutions comic run, regardless of available technology, what would it be? And we had kind of already mentioned that World War II time would be cool. But are there any others that come to mind?
yeah, I actually would like to see. I think I talked about this in my video, but I would like to see like the prehistoric, like Ice Age time
Mm.
period that the comic opens with. I know that that would, kind of gets close to Beast Wars, but I think that there would be enough difference there that it could be interesting. So that would probably be the next one.
Yeah, I think a lot of people probably look at that idea and go, "Well, I can't select a time period that really didn't have technology in it because what would they transform into?" But you think, well,
Right.
Beast Wars did it just fine, so
Right.
why couldn't
Exactly.
why couldn't we have a time period where there was no technology? They could just be the wildlife of that time period.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a way that you could do something like the Wild West as well, which is another contender for me. I guess you could get away with the carriage kind of thing,
Hmm.
but you could still do wildlife in like a Wild West kind of setting. That could be cool too.
Well, Moonbase, thank you so much for hopping on the show. I always like to give this ending time for you to talk to the audience. If you have anything big coming up, if you have anything to promote, just tell the audience what's going on.
Yeah, so I'm still chugging away with videos covering the Energon universe. I am toiling away on my IDW retrospective as well. A while since I put one of those out, but I'm still working on it. It's still in the tank. Yeah, I guess in terms of big things, gearing up for the release of G.I. Joe #1. So yeah, I'm looking
Hmm.
forward to covering that on the channel.
That is a series I still need to hop into. Having read through Transformers and Void Rivals, I have been very bad at not catching up with what's going on with the GI Joe side of the world.
Well, that's the nice thing about it is that you kind of don't have to, they don't really intersect that deeply. Not quite an IDW situation, so you can kind of pick and choose a little bit more.
The IDW, what was it called? Revolution or whatever it was
Yeah,
called.
yeah.
Definitely was an interesting time for the comics.
Yeah, that's another area where I might call it a bit of a misstep.
Yeah, something that you can maybe skip over and get to the better stuff.
Yeah, yeah. There was some okay stuff in there, but for the most part, yeah, I don't know how essential I would consider it.
Well, Moonbase, thank you again so much for hopping on the show, and thank you everybody who's been watching the series. See you guys all on the next one.